the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. I want to thank the listeners of our affiliate, KEPW.org here in Eugene. It's an FM station. You can also find it on the net. And we really appreciate you being with us. Today is August 22nd, 2017. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast. Today we have with us a returning friend of our show and really a tremendous advocate for our planet and for our Earth, Donna Gilmore, who started SantaNofreeSafety.org and who really was the person who has begun to make aware that our elected officials are storing our nuclear waste in the United States in practically half-inch thick containers that are known to leak. And she's back with us today to talk about some current issues. Thank you, Donna, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hope everybody's awake. If you're not awake, maybe we'll wake you up by the time we get through here. Huh?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people that listen to us are on the East Coast or in fact, in Europe. So there's a lot of people. Since we're on the internet, it's not just West Coast. It's frankly, a lot of it is East Coast. So a lot of our listeners are Texas and East Coast and some, I think, even in Europe. So we welcome the entire world. But
by the way, there's a few hot issues going on. Let me just mention, and then we can go into each of them. We still have, there's a bill in the House, federal level, we're talking H.R. 3053, and it's promising all the elected officials, and they're buying it right now, that it's going to solve our nuclear waste problem. We've got over 2,400 canisters around the country storing lethal nuclear waste in mostly half-inch thick steel canisters, and they each contain as much highly lethal cesium as was released from the Chernobyl nuclear accident. So you basically have Chernobyl in the can, 2,400 of these around the country. And this bill proposes to start taking those Chernobyl cans away and shipping them to somebody else's community. And they're getting a lot of support for this bill. And the problem with the bill is, in order to attempt to do that, these things are not safe. They could already be starting to crack, and you can't transport canisters with cracks. You're supposed to be able to inspect the fuel inside the containers. These are fuel assemblies that were burned in nuclear reactors. And they may be very fragile because the nuclear plants are really pushing the limit on how much long they can burn these things. But because these canisters are welded shut, they can't even look inside to see what's going on. So they want to take this fragile fuel and these fragile canisters, put them on the rail system, and hopefully they'll make it to wherever they're going to send it. The NRC is still studying whether just the vibration of the train is enough to cause the fuel assemblies to become damaged. And yet we've got this bill 3053, and I listened to all three sessions where they discussed this bill in the Congress and in the Energy Commerce Committee. It passed the Energy Commerce Committee on a 49 voted for it, Democrats and Republicans, only 4 against. They didn't talk about the fact that this bill wants to eliminate existing safety requirements for storage and transport. So the only way they'd be able to transport this stuff is to ignore safety requirements for nuclear waste. I mean, it's crazy. These are just basic things. I mean, you want to be able to monitor the fuel and monitor the containers so they don't leak. They want to get rid of those requirements out of the law.
What is their justification for this?
Money.
Saving money, saving the taxpayers' money.
No, it's liability. Okay, the utilities want this bill because it eliminates their liability. I spoke to an industry insider who was at the original meeting where they decided to use these thin wall canisters. The rest of the country uses thick wall casts that are anywhere from 10 to 19 3/4 inches thick, depending on the brand.
You mean the rest of the countries around the world, not the rest of our country?
The rest of the world, not the rest of the country, the rest of the world. You know, so they use containers. They aren't welded shut. They have ways to monitor to prevent leaks, not just know after it leaks. They're designed for longer term storage. So they had a meeting years ago, and they consciously knew that these things would only last 20 or 30 years, these thin wall, but they cost less than the thick ones. And so when people in that meeting would bring up, and this is an industry insider meeting, when people would bring up the risk of these, and that, the thick ones didn't have it, they said, hey, well, by then, the federal government will own this stuff. It won't be our problem.
Wow.
And because of the power of the nuclear industry and the capture of our Nuclear Regulatory Commission and Department of Energy, I mean, they were able to pull this off. And the NRC actually approved these thin wall canisters that cannot be inspected inside or out. The NRC knows they can prematurely crack. And when a crack starts in stainless steel, it has a unique structure that the crack grows on its own until it grows all the way through the container. And they don't know if these have cracks in them. They don't know how deep the cracks are. And even if they could find the cracks, they can't repair them once it's loaded with a nuclear fuel. They can't maintain them. They have no early warning monitoring system to know before these things leak. And they have no plan in place if one of them leaks. Even the company that makes these, there's 3 main companies that make these, Holtec, Dr. Singh, the president of the company, said even a microscopic through-wall crack will release millions of curies of radionuclides into the environment. So, and he said you can't repair them, even if you could find a crack. We're talking even a microscopic crack. Even if you could find these cracks and you could find a way to repair them in the face of all that, it with the unique nature of stainless steel, it will just introduce another area that can start cracks from happening. So this bill is designed to change the laws so that they can unsafely transport waste across the country. This bill also eliminates any requirements to do a site evaluation of where you're going to put the waste. It takes away current federal, state, and local water and air rights, so that reduces your challenges that you can have against somebody that wants to dump this waste in your community. So there is some good stuff in the current law, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. There's a lot of good features in there. And if they wanted to approve a site to put this waste, another site, they could do that without wiping out all these, excellent requirements that are currently in the law. This bill would actually, even though they don't tell you this directly, but because of what it does is it gives total authority to the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy has never managed a site that didn't leak, at least that I'm not aware of. You got Hanford, Savannah River, you name it. It gives total authority to the DOE to make private contracts with private companies, takes away all public rights, all congressional rights, all oversight, transparency, input, away from the public, away from states, away from everybody, and they can do what they want privately. Even after the site is built, you have no say, access. But in those 3 sessions I listened into, and the Energy and Commerce, they didn't talk about any of this stuff. These people voting for this, elected officials voting this, don't even know this is in the bill. This is a 76-page bill. It took me 2.5 days to figure out what the heck they were doing.
Now, how close is this to being voted on in the Congress? Like, where is it at? Do you know?
Well, it's in the House, ready to go as soon as they want to, bring it to a vote. So when they come back in September, they're going to be coming back in September to vote on this. So we need to get the word out to our elected officials, local officials, state officials, federal officials, and that's what I'm doing and what we're doing here locally is we're educating our local officials because, they've sent our local city councils in San Diego County, Orange County. They have sent letters to, the congressman and Senator Feinstein, Senator Harris, California, saying, hey, we want this waste out of here, But, and some of them even supported this bill without knowing what's in it. Once we're able to meet with the city council folks and tell them what this bill does, then they oppose it. So that works. So we need to get the word out at all levels, and it means a lot if you can get a city council person to get to understand this and let their House members know they don't want this bill to pass. It's got all these things wrong with it. The focus needs to be on the making this stuff stored safer where it is and put in a form where it can be transported. Right now, we're in really bad shape in this country because we have these ticking time bomb Chernobyl cans. May already have cracks, but no one knows if they do because they can't inspect for cracks. We don't know. We do know that the Coburg nuclear plant in South Africa had a container. It didn't have nuclear waste in it, but they said, well, it's comparable to our canisters, similar, same kind of material, same manufacturing. It leaked in 17 years. 17 years. And it was thicker than most of the canisters in this country. The cracks were deeper than the thickness of the canisters.
So the likelihood is we actually have leaking canisters, but nobody can tell if they're leaking yet until it becomes a major disaster.
Well, hopefully, if we have leaking canisters, the utilities will tell us because you're talking about millions of curies of radioactivity coming out. And at some point, there is a potential, for a potential explosion. If they're using high burn-up fuel, there's a lot of hydrides that build up, and if you get oxygen to that, enough oxygen, you could have a hydrogen gas and other kind of gas explosions. So, there is a risk for that. And so, these are the, problems. And then instead what's happening now, so what needs to happen, and I've got a document right at the top of sanonofresafety.org, right at the top of the homepage, that goes over these issues that I'm talking about. Is in this one document, it has a sample letter to elected officials, and then in addition, it has a short paper on what our current problem is and recommendations to solve it. So rather than just being whiners and complainers, it actually has recommendations of how we need to get out of this mess, at least buy ourselves at least another 100 years.
So that's the first bullet point you have on your homepage. It says reasons to oppose H.R. 3053, NWPA Amendment Act, and recommendations.
Right, exactly. And so the first 2 pages are the letter. The next page in the letter references the other part of the document, which is recommended solutions and more details on the problem. And it has a 1-page executive summary. You know, we got a short attention span. You know, everybody's got a lot on their plate, so it's a 1-page executive summary. The next page is a visual that has a simple checkbox where you can see the comparison between the thin wall canisters and the thick. So
that's pretty remarkable. There's 13 items. Let's read them. They're safety features, and they have thin wall canisters, 1/2 inch thick to 5/8 inch thick, and then thick wall casks, which are 10 inches to 19.75 inches thick. The thick wall casks are what the rest of the world stores their waste in. The thin wall canisters are what the United States stores our waste in. Listen to this. It says, won't crack is maintainable. These are the things the thick wall cask will do. It won't crack. It's maintainable. It has the ability to inspect both inside and outside, ability to repair and replace seals, early warning monitor to prevent leaks, continuous radiation monitoring, ASME container certification, defense in depth or redundancy, stored in a concrete building, gamma and neutron protection. Now, the thin wall canisters here, it says it requires vented concrete overpack. What does that mean?
Okay, I guess I need to make that clear. Well, because the thin wall canisters are so thin, they don't protect from gamma rays and neutrons.
Oh my gosh!
So they have to be. If you get next to one of these thin wall ones, it can kill you. So they have to take the thin wall canister and put it in this big thick concrete, and sometimes there's some steel, a big thick cast, mainly concrete cask. It's a cast or an overpack. It's basically the canister has to go inside some kind of a thick concrete.
Okay. Well, let me finish the last.
The problem is it has air vents. Okay, I probably should reword that because it obviously isn't clear. Yeah, so the thick concrete overpack or cast have to have air vents, otherwise the fuel will overheat in the thin canister.
That's why it can't be inspected also, huh?
Well, that's another reason, because you can't get close to it. It has to stay inside the thick concrete overpack or concrete cast, and they're trying to invent some way to actually stick something robotically through the air vents, through these small air vents, and try and find some way to inspect the surface of the canister. They haven't even begun to attempt to they managed to come up with a little robot that will crawl on the sides of some of these canisters. But they can't, so the NRC will tell people, oh, well, we're, working at this, blah, blah, blah. We have this robot. And the NRC posted a blog about this robot. Well, there's nothing on the friggin' end of that robot that does anything. So, and it doesn't even cover all the surface of the container. And, so it's just a big smoke and mirror show. And then even if they did find something that could find cracks, which they don't have, I've got other evidence showing that this is not a good plan. Then what do you do? They got nowhere to repair these things.
Well, they have three more things. Let me get to the three more things because this is stunning. transportable without an additional cask. And the thin wall canister says cannot transport with cracks. Now, the thick wall you can transport without additional cask. Proven technology, and it says unknown if cracked, and the world uses it. And the market leader, everybody in the world uses it except for the United States.
Yes.
That's kind of shocking. There isn't another country that's using these thin wall casks.
Well, Holtec is starting to be able to sell his thin wall technology to other countries. He's going in there and saying, hey, the United States is standardizing on this, and these things will last 100 years, and there's nobody, these other people, they don't know the difference. He just makes these promises without any substantiation of fact. And
how is this allowable? How, if we look at these safety features alone, you look at this and you're thinking, this is the most dangerous technological waste we've ever created in the history of humankind. Yeah. How is it that the United States has decided to be so reckless and so nonchalant about it?
Yeah, that just kind of tells you how much corporations have taken over our democracy. This is what's happened in this country, and here's how the NRC ends up approving this. And then I have a story to tell you about the transport cask. The NRC has 5 commissioners. They're all appointed by the president, but they have to be confirmed by the Senate. Obama would get 1 safety conscious, and it's a rotating, a new president doesn't come in and pick all 5. It's a rotating thing. So they get to pick a couple while they're there. So he was able to only get 1 safety conscious NRC commissioner, and the other 4 would put industry profits over our safety. He could not get the Senate to confirm safety conscious commissioners. And then to make matters worse, Chairman Yasko, who was the safety conscious one on there when Fukushima happened, he wanted to stop all new approvals. He wanted to say, hey, before we do any more approvals, let's learn the lessons of Fukushima and make sure that this isn't going to happen to us. He got so much pushback from the Senate and Congress and he personally said this, that the pressure was unbelievable on him. And the sad part is there's 5 commissioners. They all have equal votes. Even if you're the chairman, Yasko was chairman, he doesn't have any more votes than anybody else. Okay. And so they voted 4-1 to continue approving reactors, and ignoring the lessons of Fukushima. That's what happened. And then what they did is the 4 NRC more profit-oriented commissioners, maybe they're profit motivated, maybe they're delusional and in love with nuclear industry. I'm not totally sure of their motivations. They wrote a letter to President Obama with some trumped up charges about Yasko, trying to get Yasko to fire him. Okay. And our congressperson, Darrell Issa, who's our representative down here in San Diego and part of Orange County, he exposed that letter to the media. So he was really in cahoots with the nuclear industry to try and get the only safety conscious commissioner off the commission. And this was after Fukushima. So, and then if you want to get promoted at the NRC into management, you better play nice with the nuclear industry.
Are they just in complete denial about the harm that it causes? Do they just completely 100% deny the harm?
Well, it's mainly that, they trust these vendors. They trust the vendors that they're not going to do anything that's going to cause a problem. Oh, there's so much redundancy. This is this is a half-inch thick. That's thick, you know. I mean, they're just delusional. Oh well, that, you know, that we have to overbuild everything. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. You know, it's what I call a love relationship, just as if you or someone else was in love with a person and you knew that person was really bad for them, but you couldn't tell them anything. They just get mad at you. You know, they just didn't want to see it because they were in love. It's exactly the same part of the brain in action, whether it's love of nuclear energy or love for a whole lot of money that you can make if you're on the pro-nuclear side. Whichever it is, this is what it is. They're basically delusional. And they will, you know, they will deny anything as a fact, you know, that doesn't fit what they want to believe. You know, that's, and on the flip side, what we have are people, most people, well, I would almost say not all, but almost, even when they know the problems, like these ticking time bomb Chernobyl cans, that there's no plan if they leak. I mean, if they had a plan to stop it, that would be one thing, but they don't. And so the people that know this, they still live here. They haven't moved. Well, I plan to sell my house once I recover from my back surgery, but still, I'm not ready to leave the country or leave the Northern Hemisphere. But I want to go to a safer place and continue this fight.
Yeah, but the question is, where's that safer place? If you look where the nuclear waste, I mean, John Oliver talked a lot about our growing. I mean, I think nuclear waste is the biggest catastrophe, ignored catastrophe we have in this country. It's everywhere.
Well, in addition to the nuclear waste, none of us were ever told that in order to operate a nuclear reactor, it has to release a lot of radiation just to run it.
Right.
So you're really signing up. But they don't tell people this. When those plants get approved, I don't know anybody. I mean, when I lived in Sacramento, we had Rancho Seco, and we had the utility. It was a public utility company. They were coming to college. When I was in college, they came and made a presentation at our college talking about how great this reactor was going to be. They didn't tell us just to operate it. It was going to be putting radiation out into the air and the water.
Every single year, nonstop.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
And then they let them self-regulate. The utility gets to measure their own radiation and provide an annual report to the NRC of what was released. And, which is ludicrous. And, so it's the system, the laws over the years and regulations have been systematically eroded. And then now the NRC isn't even following their own regulations. So anyway, but okay, so we have this checklist. It's an easy visual. I have used it with safety conscious NRC commissioners. I've used it with Ralph Nader. It's an excellent talking point document, a simple visual, has a picture of the thin and thick cast. And there are a few places in the U.S. that have the thick cast, which is good, but they don't put them in buildings. And you really need, because these things are going to have to last a long time. You want to eliminate any environmental factors. You want to beef up security. So at Japan and Fukushima, they used cast. They didn't use thin ones, and they put them in buildings. And Germany, I've got a picture on here of the thick cast in buildings in Japan and Germany. So those are just a couple of examples.
So in Japan, at all those nuclear facilities that are closed down now, I think they only have one or two of them running. All the other ones have their nuclear waste that's stored in these thick casts.
Well, when the waste comes, when the waste. When they're through burning the waste in the reactor, these are small uranium pellets about the size of a pencil eraser in a huge long tubes of either stainless steel or a zirconium alloy metal rod. They call it cladding. And they have to, these rods, they're assembled, they put them together in an assembly of rods. So after you need to unload this fuel from the reactor after it's burned up, as long as they think they can get away with burning it up, they have to put it underwater in pools. They call them spent fuel pools. And because they are too hot, thermally hot, and too radioactive to put in dry storage. And they have to sit in those pools for years, sometimes decades, before they're cool enough to put in dry storage, even in vented containers. So now the thick casts are not vented. These thick casts are designed to store them and transfer the heat out without transferring the radiation out. But there is no dry storage container that will totally stop all radiation. So whether it's thin with these concrete overpacks or the thick cast, there is going to be some radiation that's going to be coming through the walls of that canister. So just to let you know, that's not 100%. So anyway, so that's probably another reason to have them in buildings. But so anyway, let me just mention the rest of this document. After the picture, there's 2 pages that go into a little more detail about the problem. Has some reference. I think it has some references. I may not have added the references. Trying to remember if I did. Maybe. I think I need to add a reference page. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so it's a little bit more detail. The last 2 pages are a little more detail on the problems and the recommended solution. The recommended solution is to basically, obviously, quit using the thin wall canisters and get this fuel and these thin wall canisters transferred to thick wall casts. And the thick wall casts are designed for storage and transport. And so for people, wanting to make sure these things are ready to roll as soon as you can get it out of here, the thick wall cast is your solution. Now, here is what the NRC is doing instead, and not many people know this. I just actually ran across it yesterday when I was doing some research on the NRC website. The NRC, there's a Holtec MP190 transport cast that Holtec has been trying to get approved through the NRC since 2015. And the NRC technical staff, there's a lot of good people there, good technical people. They know what the right thing is, but they get overridden by management. But typically will bring up great points. After they review an application, they will ask the vendor for more information because obviously something was inadequate in their application. So in this case, with this Holtec 190 transport cast, the NRC said, well, you haven't proved to us that you have a way to verify that the thin canisters have no cracks in them. Well, we've already discussed the fact they have no technology to do that because transport regulations do not allow even partial cracks in the thin wall canisters before you transport them. And Holtec has been trying to come up with some way to get around that. He says, well, we'll keep an extra, this is what they came up with. Well, we'll keep an extra canister that's empty, doesn't have any fuel in it, and we'll inspect that one. And we'll assume if there's no cracks in that one, that none of the rest of them have cracks.
Wow.
And the NRC said, nope, we're not buying that. Try again. We're not buying that. And then in addition, the NRC said, well, you need to verify that the high burnup fuel in those welded shut canisters is not damaged. See, here's another sticky thing. They allowed them to use what's called high burnup fuel, which is fuel they allowed to burn over twice as long. It makes them more money, but it makes us less safe. They burn it twice as long, and it starts to damage the rods that hold the fuel pellets, and cause those rods to become brittle. So if you have something that's brittle and not flexible, where it could shatter like glass in an accident, that's a real problem. So the solution they came up with because of this is this and fuel that's already damaged is they put them in extra small they put them in small cans, so all the pellets won't fall over everything else in the canister. But with high burn of fuel, what they've done is they put it in dry storage without putting it in any extra cans inside first. And there's science that says that after it's in dry storage, it can become damaged. The cladding can start to fail after it's in dry storage. So the NRC asked, you need to verify that high burn of fuel in those welded shut canisters, that it hasn't become damaged. Well, they have no way to do that without unwelding the canister and putting it back underwater or in some kind of a dry handling facility. And, anyway, that's a whole nother topic about how you accomplish that. But so really the NRC staff, rightly so, was asking for things that they really need to be able to do. And so I have those documents. I have a page dedicated just to Holtec. It's under nuclear waste. You'll see a Holtec page. And it has these actual documents where the NRC is asking, and this isn't me making this up, these are NRC communications with Holtec. And so that's there. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great, and I shared this with everybody and they're getting all excited like we won something. And I said, well, hey, don't get too excited. Normally the technical staff tries their best, but they usually get overridden by politics and the management approves it anyway. So guess what? Yesterday, what did I find? I was searching the NRC database and I find an approval for this MP190 transport cast by Holtec.
Wow.
Signed certification. And I haven't had time to finish looking at all their so-called justification for how they approved this. But so far what I did read is get this. They say, well, we're going to assume if the canister's only 5 years old that there's no partial cracks. And so you don't even have to inspect, which they can't do anyway. But by doing that, they're ignoring the fact that they paid to have EPRI, or somebody paid to have EPRI. EPRI is a lab that the NRC uses. It's actually a utility-funded lab. So EPRI actually went out to 4 different nuclear plants around the country, and at Diablo Canyon in California, they checked a couple of canisters. They can't inspect it for cracks, but they could see if it had all the conditions where it could be cracking, and they have no way to know. And the Diablo Canyon canister that they checked was only 2 years old, and it already had all the conditions needed for it to start cracking. And they found corrosive salts. They took some kind of a brush and scraped off the top of this dusty canister and examined the particles, and they found corrosive salt from the ocean. And you add a little moisture to that, and that can start the corrosion cracking process in stainless steel. They found that. They found low enough temperature for water to stay on the canister and melt the salt, and they found the salt. 2-year-old canister. So they're just denying their own evidence in order to approve this thing.
Well, not only do they deny the evidence, they deny the harm it causes to people. This is the whole, and I think, frankly, this is what makes a lot of people not actively engage in this topic, because it feels like just a freaking waste of time. Like, people feel like even if we were to protest, even if we were to do all of this, it just gets rubber stamped. It's almost as if the military just has complete authority no matter what they want. They get it.
Okay. Well, let me finish the story, and then I'll tell you why I disagree with that. Okay. Why there's more hope than you think. If the canisters are over 5 years old, then they're requiring that they inspect the outside wall of the canister. It's a cylinder, outside wall of the cylinder, not the top and bottom, but just the cylinder, that they inspect that for surface defects. So now we're not talking cracks, we're talking surface defects. and they only have to check, which doesn't tell you if there's cracks or not. It doesn't tell you. You won't know from just doing that if there's cracks or how deep cracks are. They only have to check 20% of the canisters at the site of what they're planning to transport, and if they don't find any surface defects in those 20 canisters, then they can assume that the 80% of the rest of them are okay.
Wow, they can just assume that 80%, they can inspect 20% and make an accurate assumption.
Well, I don't even call it an inspection. Let's be careful. Let's be careful, because they're just inspecting for surface defects. They're not even inspecting cracks. I've got another paper that addresses the various technologies available to check for cracks in stainless steel vessels. This is the vessel, and so they're planning to use something called eddy current testing to find surface defects. Anyway, it's like a ruse. It's just like, it's just total BS. So anyway, getting back to why do I think we still have some hope to do something about this? Because the people at the top levels that could change this don't even know all these things I've just told you. The chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that Obama appointed, Chairman McFarland, she was the safety conscious appointment. She had studied nuclear waste for decades. She was on Obama's Blue Ribbon Commission for what do we do with all this waste that's sitting all around the country. So she considers herself a nuclear waste expert. I met with her, she came to California, made a presentation saying once the fuel's in dry storage, nothing can go wrong. I had sent her emails explaining the problems to her, never got a response. So I managed to talk to her at the break after she made a presentation. It was in line in the women's restroom. One of the first time it's good to be a woman is when you had a woman commissioner, so you could have a restroom conversation. So I'm standing behind her in line. I introduced myself. I said, well, these thin canisters can't be inspected for cracks. And she said, what are you talking about? She did not know. And I said, well, with the thick
I've been thinking about that. You've told me that before. Do you think that she was feigning ignorance, or do you think it was genuine?
No, not at all. Not at all, because she looked very confused. And I said, well, when the thick ones, you can get next to them. And as soon as I said that, her head went up, and you could see the light bulb go off in her head. And then she says out loud, she says, oh, that's right. The thin ones have to go in the concrete, and there's no technology that we have that can inspect that. She just thought she knew when she didn't. And I was able to explain it in a way where she could understand why, because I've learned enough about the technology to speak more, in more detail and know how to, say these things she truly did not know. Who in their right mind would think that the NRC would approve a container for the most lethal waste in the world and not be able to inspect or monitor it? Who would ever believe that would even happen? It's unbelievable, And so she didn't know, and then she kind of regains her composure and says, "Well, maybe it's not that important."
Wow.
But this is the person who was chairman of the NRC, thought she knew what she was talking about, all the staff that approved these containers work for her. Now, I met with lots of NRC staff that work in the area that approves these thin canisters. I was invited to speak at the annual waste conference, NRC Waste Conference, by the NRC Director of Spent Fuel Management, Mark Lombard. And I said, Mark, why are you, so he has maybe, I don't know, one or two bosses in between him and the chairman. But here, their own staff are approving these things, and the chairman doesn't even know about it. Has no clue. So we haven't got to the decision makers with the truth. What are they surrounded with? They're surrounded with vendors that are out there selling them on how great their technology is and how safe it is. Yeah. We're the decision makers are surrounded by NRC managers that are willing to be pimps for the nuclear industry to keep their job and get promoted, and maybe a promise of some cushy consultant job after they retire, which I found a website where they all seem to go after retirement. And then you have NRC employees that are afraid to speak up because they know what happens to whistleblowers. They not only could lose their job, they could be blackballed from the entire nuclear industry and won't be able to find work, which has actually happened. So we have to jump all of that and get right to the decision makers and the influencers. So if we educate our city councils about the facts, we get our city councils to get the word out. We get some media attention, because when the city council passes a resolution, that makes news.
And talk to your governors. Make sure you fax us. That's the one thing I did, was I faxed this document to the governor's office and called Kate Brown's office. And I'm going to do this new updated one again. I'm going to use your new information. I'm going to do a rinse and repeat again on this effort, because, we really do need to remind them that they can stand up. I think you're right that they don't. When I called and I spoke to the Oregon representatives here in Oregon. I think there's 6 or 7 of them. They were very open to listening. I used your bullet points, and I basically said, look, these are the reasons why. I had the document in front of me, and I actually asked them for their fax number and faxed it to them afterwards, because I have a fax in my office. But they really did not, even Schrader, who is a co-signer of the bill, his office didn't seem aware. They were not aware of it. And I said, yeah, I'll definitely send you some information on this, because I asked him to change his mind and not become a co-sponsor on this bill. Take his name off of the bill.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, these are serious, but this is how it works, I guess, is we have to decide that we're going to get engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot do this. I know all the facts, but I'm only one person, and I do my best to get other people trained so they can be active and do this. But it's been very difficult to get people that are willing to spend the time to save their family, because this is what this is about. We're trying to save our homes and our families, and we're running out of time. Most of these canisters have only been in use about 10 years. Some of them have hit the 20-year mark. I also have on the homepage, I have an inventory sheet. I probably should have included that inventory sheet with that handout. It's a 2-page inventory, and it lists, it's sorted by state, and it says how many canisters you have, whether they're the thin ones or the thick ones, and how many, and when they were first loaded with fuel. So you can tell how old your canisters are. So you can get some sense of how close to when they could leak. Now, the cracking technologies, there's 2 questions. One is, when will it leak is one question. And once it leaks, or not, when will it crack? When will it start cracking? And the second question is, when it starts cracking, how long will it take for the crack to go through that 1/2-inch wall? So there's 2 questions. The second question, once a crack is there, how long will it take? The NRC told me about 16 years. Once a crack is there, that's what they said. All right. And I asked, I said, well, when will a crack start? And I said, well, we have no idea. All we can know is they have conditions for cracking. We can't predict when it will start cracking. Or we know they have the conditions, but without inspecting, you don't know. So, but we do know is that the Coburg plant cracked at least in 17 years. That we do know. So we know cracks can start. And we know the 2-year-old.
What did they do when that one cracked? I mean, what's their solution when they find something?
They replaced the tank. They just they got a new tank.
So that's their idea, to get these, even though these lighter canisters, and just transport the waste from one canister to the other when they see it start to crack?
No, they don't. Are you talking about South Africa, or are you talking about here?
No, the one where they found one that was leaking. When you said they replaced it?
No, that did not have nuclear waste in it. The NRC doesn't have any operating experience of canisters with spent fuel in them. Zippo, they haven't been in use that long. And plus, because they can't inspect for cracks, they don't know how many already have cracks, or how many cracks they have, or how deep the cracks are. So they have.
So we haven't gone through the learning curve yet. We have not gone through the learning curve. Right. We're about to hit the wall on the learning curve. Yeah.
Exactly. But so what the NRC did is, well, let's look at similar components to these similar containers that are also made out of the same kind of stainless steel. They have welding, they call them pressure vessels. So they looked around the world at nuclear plants to look for similar containers, not holding nuclear waste, that they considered comparable. They had same vulnerability or similar vulnerability to these canisters. So it was a tank. It was actually a tank, and the NRC considered this comparable. And they were mainly looking only for operating experience with salt air. That's all they were looking for. There are a whole lot of other things that can cause canisters to start cracking. They told me last fall at the annual NRC meeting, I said, okay, you studied and you looked for operating experience for moist salt air exposure to containers. You've done that. That's where they found the Coburg data showing 17-year through-wall crack. I said, what about all the other things that can cause these stainless steel canisters to crack? Are you going to be those things, and when? And they tried to give me some bureaucratic BS. Mark Lombard was there, the one that invited me to speak a couple of years before that meeting. I spoke at their annual conference. First they tried to tell me that nobody was. I was calling in on the phone from California. The meeting was in Maryland, so it wasn't worth spending money to fly there. But I did call in, and I said, and I asked that question. First they tried to tell me that nobody was there that could answer that question. Okay, well, I knew Mark Lombard was there, and I know he would know the answer to that. So I asked, well, is Mark Lombard there? And then I heard a bunch of laughter, and I heard Mark Lombard say, "Oh dear, I'm in trouble now." And then he got up to the microphone, and I asked my question, and he tried to just give me some, bureaucratic BS that didn't answer my question, and I didn't fall for it, and I kept pushing and pushing. And then he said, "Oh, well, EPRI's here, and we hired EPRI to study this, so let me have you talk to EPRI." So he basically offloaded the problem, didn't answer it, offloaded it to EPRI. So then this EPRI person gets on the line, and he tries to give me his, EPRI, line or vendor line, whatever you want to call it. I guess he's the scientific lab. But I just kept going until he gave me a straight answer. And the answer is no. They don't plan to look at any other things that can cause these things to crack. So they don't plan to do. They don't want any. They don't want. So they're not going to be writing up any evidence. But in the NRC minutes to a meeting where I first learned about this in July. Well, there's two meetings. There's a July and an August meeting in 2014. in the meeting minutes, it talks about things like bees' nests, in any little critters that go in those vent holes, these air vents. They can get in those air vents, and they like to do that because it's nice and warm in there. So they can go in these air vents, and just little microscopic cracks on the surface from their, walking around on it, it can be enough to break that thin film that makes stainless, and can initiate the cracking process. So,
this is stunning that the NRC, they actually have a page on their website about safety culture. And I wonder how they're going to manage this page if this 3053 were to pass, because it says it defines safety culture as the core values and behaviors resulting from the collective commitment by leaders and individuals to emphasize safety over competing goals to ensure protection of people and the environment. So isn't that one of the highlights of this Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 2017, is that it puts cost and speed over safety?
Yes.
So that's in direct conflict with the safety culture goals of the NRC. But then again, I guess what we're doing with this Nuclear Waste Amendment Act is taking the authority over the waste and giving it to private industry, and we're relieving the NRC of having to deal with it.
Well, they won't be breaking the law, not following all those safety requirements, because they will be out of the law. So that's one less leverage for us to sue them.
Wow.
It takes away our powers, what it does.
Well, Donna, I want to thank you for being willing to keep speaking up about this. I know that we are it sounds like we're beating the same old drum. Oh, yeah, here's that lady talking. This is a critical issue that everybody who's in the United States needs to go to your website, www.sanonofresafety.org, SANONOFRESAFETY.org, and pull up these handouts that you have on the front page. Pull it up, open that up, print it out, fax it, and mail it, and call the elected officials, the Congress people in your states, and call your governor and call your city council members. It only takes an hour, maybe two max, once a week, once a week, to just give them a call and urge them that we are in a critical time. This is going to be a very serious issue for the entire world if the United States goes forward with this plan. Because nuclear waste does not stop at our borders. This is going to be a catastrophe.
Yeah, I always like to look at the positive side of things. The positive side of this bill being out there, it gives us an opportunity to shine the light on the current problems of the canisters. So, they have your Congress people and your city council people, they have a reason to listen to you right now about this, because there's a bill. So they have to make a decision. Are they going to support it or not? So now they're more open to give this priority to look at. And so now it's an opportunity to educate them on what's going on with these ticking time bomb Chernobyl cans. And I want to mention one other thing.
We have 40 seconds.
Yeah, the GAO did a report saying the NRC has a safety culture problem. So people are afraid to speak up.
Let's end. Thank you, Donna. Please take action, you guys. Put your courage feet on. We'll talk with you tomorrow. It's very, very urgent that everyone go to sanonofresafety.org. Take some action. Thank you.